Hebrews, Israelites, and Jews are three names that keep coming back to us like old memories. Each one holds hundreds of years of history, faith, and fate. They didn't just happen by chance. They are marks that have been through nations, escapes, and promises from God. But there are secrets behind these words that have made the people God picked for himself who they are. Many people think that words that sound alike are actually different parts of the same ultimate plan. But are these three names all for the same person? Or does each one show a different beginning, goal, and time in God's history? It's not that easy to say. Even though they come from the same spiritual bloodline, the words Hebrew, Israelite, and Jew came into use at different times, marking different stages in God's revelation to people. Hebrew is the first word to show up in old records, long before Israel became a country. Scholars say the word comes from the Semitic root avar, which means to go through or to cross. It talks about both a group of people and a way of life, crossing lines to follow God's call. Genesis 14:13 says that Abraham was the first person to be called Hebrew. In order to follow the word of an unknown God, he gave up his land, his family, and everything he knew. His name became the title of everyone who, like him, chose to walk by faith. In the past, the name Hebrew didn't refer to a unified country, but to a mobile and traveling family. It's what people from other countries called this group of people who moved based on strange claims. The people were known by this name even when they were slaves in Egypt. Hebrew identity meant movement, faith, and separation. It was a path that went across the old world and led to a goal that could only be met by God. But many years later, a new personality came into being. Abraham's grandson Jacob was given a new name by God's angel after fighting with him, Israel, Genesis 32:28. That name changed everything. He had 12 sons, and the 12 groups that would make up the country of Israel came from those boys. After that, the Hebrew people were called Israelites. The word Israelite refers to a group organization, a society with clear rules, a defined area, and a spiritual goal. This is the group of people that God led out of Egypt through the desert and to the promised land. Hebrew meant the faith of the patriarchs as individuals, while Israelite meant the promise made by God to a whole country. Israel wasn't just a name, it was a promise that came true. It stood for the people who would get the law, the priests, the temple, and David's throne. And there were kings and teachers during that time. The past of the Israelites led to the Messiah's coming in every way. But as time went on, the country became split up. The name Israel was kept for the 10 tribes in the north, while Judah was given to the state in the south. Assyria took over the north, but the south lived on, and a new name began to appear, Jew. The word comes from Yehudah, which means Judah. Judah is one of the groups that came from Jacob. People who came back to the Holy Land after being sent to Babylon were called Jews, no matter what group they were from. The word Jew changed from a geographical idea to a spiritual and cultural one. It wasn't just about where things were, it was also about faith, custom, and defiance. Jews were those who kept the law, worshipped, observed the Sabbath, and waited for predictions to come true. During the times of Ezra and Nehemiah, as well as later under Persian and Roman rule, this name was given more weight. So when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, he was known to be Jewish because he was from the tribe of Judah, David's son, and the one who kept the law. It's not a repeat to say Hebrew, Israelite, or Jew. These words are steps on the ladder of divine revelation. The first one talks about faith that goes beyond lines. The second one is about a country formed by a promise. And the third one is about keeping your identity when things get hard. If you understand this order, you'll see the unseen line that links Abraham, Moses, David, and the Messiah. Each name holds a holy story, and all of them together show that God cared about his people, even when the rest of the world forgot about them. Before we go on, please leave a like if this topic moves you and think about joining to our channel so you don't miss any more videos like this. Each story here is more than just a letter. They show a plan that will last forever. Do you feel like you are a part of this story that God is still writing? Leave the word promise in the comments. Also, please leave a super thank you if you want to help this job. We can keep telling more Bible stories and spreading this message of faith and hope thanks to your gift. Thank you so much for your help. We'll keep going on our journey today. The history of the word Hebrew is still one of the most interesting parts of how God's people came to be who they are. This name has meanings that go beyond a political or ethnic label. They go across rivers, cultures, and societies. A lot of experts have tried to figure out what this word means, and one of the most well-known is Professor Nahum Sana, whose work from 1966 suggested a regional meaning for the word. He said that the word Hebrew probably meant someone who came from the other side of the river, which was a clear reference to the people who crossed the Euphrates to get from Mesopotamia to Canaan. From this point of view, the name didn't point to a country that had been formed, but to a foreign group that was different from the people who lived in the area before. A word used to describe people who came from outside the Canaanites with different beliefs and ways of life and did not fit in with their religion and social structure. This is how the Hebrew was seen as an outsider, someone who had crossed over and didn't belong, but also didn't give up their culture to fit in with the locals. This is only one part of the term, though. In Jewish custom, the word can also be understood in terms of ancestors, which expands its spiritual meaning. According to the Midrash Bereshit Rabbah, which is written by ancient commentators and rabbinical masters, the name Hebrew is linked to both a place and a family tree. The children of Eber, or Eber, who was a straight grandson of Shem, Noah's son. For the elders, this link to Eber is important because he would be a symbol of continuity in a generation that is evil and spread out. According to tradition, this Eber would have been in charge of keeping the holy language living and not mixing with the people who rebelled at Babel. In this way, being called Hebrew also meant being part of a unique spiritual lineage, a group that refused to turn away from God and stuck to old rules. This bloodline, which Eber stood for, left behind a tradition of moral purity and quiet loyalty. It wasn't just a guess that this link between the name and spiritual loyalty existed. Rabbis told this story for hundreds of years to show that Hebrew was more than just a name. It was a witness. People who bore it were linked to a root that had not been harmed by the rebellion of the nations, even if they didn't know it. This is both a sign and a useful thing, because it shows that there was a people who, even when they were small and didn't have any land, held the promise of something eternal within them. Other current experts also point out an interesting fact. The patriarchs didn't really see themselves as Hebrews. People from other countries use the phrase in almost all of the places it's used. Because of this, experts like priest and historian Jacob Milgram came to the conclusion that the name Hebrew was given to this strange group of people from outside their own culture. In real life, it was a religious and cultural label for a nomadic one-god people who didn't have any shrines or images of gods and didn't follow the main polytheistic systems. So, the Hebrew was the one who was strange, one who walked among the countries but didn't become one of them. People saw him as someone who didn't have a set home, any holy images or a priesthood, but who had a strong personal faith in a single, unseen God. To people outside the family, this made the name sound strange. People thought the Hebrews were too different, which made them suspicious. But it is this difference that is at the heart of the divine calling. God chose a group of people who would not follow human rules, a group of people who would keep the promise alive even when everything around them tried to put it out. Because of this, the word Hebrew can't just be used as an ethnic or historical name. It starts with migration, grows with hope, and stays strong through obstacles. This word refers to the character of people who cross both physical and mental borders, people who remember a clean beginning and don't want to get lost in the crowd of countries, people who always walked with their feet on the ground and their eyes on promises that would last forever. They were never really there. They came from far away, across lines that couldn't be seen, with promises instead of homes. Over the years, the Hebrews were seen as different and strange, not just because of where they came from, but also because of how they saw the world. Archaeologists started to pay more attention to this unique identity when they found a possible link between the Hebrews in the Bible and the strange groups called Habiru, or Apiru, that were described in Egyptian and Mesopotamian records. From the 18th century BC to the 14th century BC, these writings describe the Habiru as wandering nomads, fighters, thieves, and even mercenaries who lived on the edges of established countries. They weren't a single group. Instead, they were spread out in different places and worked on the edges of social order. But there is an interesting connection. The Habiru closely mirror the Hebrew patriarchs we read about in the book of Genesis. These were men who had flocks, camps, tribal ties, and a faith that kept them separate from the other peoples around them. This idea caught on with William F. Albright, an important figure in the field of Bible history in the 20th century. He said that the Hebrews talked about in the Bible might have been part of this larger group of Habiru. There is some variation in this, as not all Habiru would have been Hebrews. However, it is likely that the Hebrews were part of this group of nomads who questioned the religion and political systems of the time. The Egyptian records from the 14th century BC, called the Amarna letters, talk about the Habiru as a constant threat to the Canaanite kings who were ruled by Egypt. Not only did they steal, but they were also people looking for land, safety, and room. This conflict between the established government and wandering groups properly describes the setting in which the Hebrews lived in the Bible. And while Egyptian texts describe them as a bother, the Bible praises them as the ones who bring the word. Kenneth A. Kitchen, a famous Egyptologist and supporter of the Old Testament's historical accuracy, also thought about this idea. In his 2003 work, he says that there is solid proof that Semitic nomads lived in Canaan in the 2nd millennium BC, and that the Bible story of the patriarchs matches up perfectly with the Habiru's stories. That is, the word Hebrew doesn't show up directly in these records, but the behavior, practices, and way of life are the same. But this identity has more to it than meets the eye. The word Hebrew has more than one meaning. It has a religious sense as well. It doesn't just mean a person's race or where they are from. It also means their mental state. Someone who is Hebrew lives in a state of change. They're not quite where they want to be yet, but they have left one place. They only have faith in God's promise to keep them going as they walk between the past and the future. Christian doctrine talks a lot about this symbolism, though it's not always clear what it means. Oscar Cullmann, a theologian, wrote about the struggle between already and not yet in Christian life. In that same piece, he talked about how the patriarchal Hebrews lived. During his 1950 book, Christ and Time, he talks about a Christian who has been called but has not yet reached full completion. The heart of biblical faith is this conflict between what has been promised and what has not yet been received. It is also what it means to be a real Hebrew. So, Hebrew is more than just a historical name, it's an ideal. It stands for the person who walks in faith even when they don't have a plan, who lives in this world as a stranger because they know they are part of a bigger promise. They are the spiritual pilgrim who doesn't give up or settle for the comfort of human buildings. Instead, they keep going, even when things are unclear. Over time, the Hebrews have been called Israelites and Jews, but the core of the person who crosses over stays the same. It shows that you walk by faith. Even now, in the 21st century, the call is still there. To be Hebrew is to live between two worlds, led not by an obvious sense of safety, but by a voice that calls your name forever. When someone is at war is the first time in the Bible that they are called a Hebrew. Abraham, who is still called Abram, is talked about not by God or by himself, but by a visitor who sees what's going on around him. Genesis 14:13 says, "Then the one who had gotten away came and told Abram the Hebrew." This phrase does more than just name something. People who are Hebrew now have a face, a name, and a story to tell. One of the most interesting things about this story is that Abram doesn't call himself a Hebrew. Someone else does. This label comes from outside the person, from someone watching him from afar. This backs up what many experts have already said. The word Hebrew came from people who lived nearby, using it to describe each other. It was how people around the world saw people who didn't follow their social, religious, or political rules. The Hebrew was not from there, the person who didn't belong and came from the other side. Abram was not from Canaan. He wasn't recognized as a Babylonian or a member of any of the settled countries either. It wasn't like he had a city, walls, an army, or any agreements with the kings in the area. He had left his family, town, and country to follow a sound that no one else could hear. He was seen as different because of this, one who walked without a plan but knew where they were going, a man who didn't have a crown but made a promise. Modern philosophers have thought a lot about this state of displacement. In his 2001 book, Radical Then, Radical Now, British Rabbi Jonathan Sacks doesn't call Abram a philosopher or a master. Instead, he calls him a wanderer who got a calling instead of a theory. He didn't get a city or a system from God. He got a promise. And Abram's answer wasn't smart, it was practical. He left everything behind. Sacks goes even further and says that the Hebrew is an example of faith that doesn't fit into the world but goes around it. As a result, being Hebrew was not a political status. It was a magical name. It was to be someone who doesn't follow the rules, doesn't follow governments, and doesn't worship local gods. Instead, they were to keep their eyes on something real but unseen. There was an altar before there was a law. There were tents all over the desert before there was a country. And the people of the promise were known as Hebrew before they were called Israel. People who walked by faith had that name. Of those who didn't carry rules or codes with them, but a particular promise from the unchanging God. That's how the spiritual base of the chosen people is built. Being Hebrew means being on the move. To live between the call and the realization is what it means. It means putting your faith in something you haven't seen yet, but that shapes every choice you make. Abraham's faith wasn't just an idea. It was a path that he took every day, with steps, moves, and giving up things. He was different from everyone else around him because of that. That was not the end of the story, though. Something new would show up over time. The word Hebrew would still be used, but it would slowly be replaced by Israelite. Not only is this a change in language, but it is also a change in history and religion. What began as a trip for one guy and his family would become the birth of a country. Tribes, alliances, rules, and land would come together to form a shared identity. The word Hebrew refers to the start, the time of the call. The word Israelite, on the other hand, means a united people. A new story starts when God changes Jacob's name to Israel. Jacob is Abraham's grandson. He then gave his 12 sons the job of making the 12 tribes. They were given a new mission, to be a holy country, set apart not just by the faith of one man, but by a national identity based on spiritual and social values. The Israelite would protect the bond if the Hebrew was the traveler of the promise, a people who are not only moving, but also know where they are going. The faith that once led lone men would now shape the structure of a whole group of people. The past of God's people went on, from Abram's tent to the camp of the tribes, from crossing the Euphrates to the Sinai desert. Each step was marked by a name, which was more than just a word. It was a living sign of the promise that would never fail. The time that sealed the change from Hebrew to Israelite happened on a strange night that was full of conflict and change. The scene has a lot to say. Jacob is by himself on the bank of the Jabbok River. He is the son of Isaac and the grandson of Abraham. Not only is he running away from seeing his brother Esau again, but he is also running away from himself and his past of fights, lies, and inner battles. There, in the dark and quiet of the night, a being from heaven surprises him. Then he starts fighting out of the blue. The fight didn't end after a short time. Genesis 32:28 says that the fight went on until dawn and was very long and fierce. When the angel finally says, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, it will be Israel, for you have fought with God and with people and won," something very important happens. It wasn't just a name change, it meant something different to each person. People used to think of Jacob as a liar or usurper, but he changed his name to Israel, which means one who wrestles with God and stands firm. This change meant that a new time was starting. Jonathan Sacks was right when he said that God's call wasn't to give thrones, but to make things possible. This time, with the new name came a new job. The name Israel wasn't just a praise. It was a spiritual seal, a heavenly statement that set up a connection between people and heaven that had never been seen before. It was from that point on that his children and grandchildren would be called the Israelites, not just Abraham's heirs. Nahum Sana, a scholar, says that this name wasn't a title or a tribe nickname, it was a predicted event. Israel became the name of a new country that had a religious meaning and a cause in heaven. Being an Israelite meant more than just being part of a big family. It meant being linked to a past of battle, victory, and God's choice. He had 12 kids, each one created a tribe, and even though the groups were different, they stayed together because of a promise made by their ancestors. They started out as small family groups with their own wandering ways of life, but this building would change over time. Initially, a group of farmers. The family grew very quickly while they were in Egypt, running away from hunger. There, in that other country, they grew so many that the leaders were scared. The Israelites were no longer just seen as newcomers. They were seen as a whole group of people. Even though the Egyptians were cruel, God's plan did not fail. The promise that God made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was still true. When the time came, the Lord used his strong hand to lead them out of Egypt. Then in the desert, Israel became clear on who they were. The country was not really born in the towns along the Nile, but at the base of Mount Sinai. God did more than set them free, he also shaped them. He gave the law to Moses there, while lightning and thunder were going off. He made a promise to the people there. Israel went from being a group of people to a holy country that was separate from everyone else. After that, the word Israelite came to mean a lot more than family history. For everyone, it meant a shared goal. We are being told to follow God's rules and show the world how good God is. People who used to be nomads were given clear rules, holy feasts, priests, offerings, and a social structure that looked like heaven's government on earth. Hebrew and Israelite mean different things than just different times. The first one stood for the outsider, who lived by faith and not by the rules. The latter stood for the community that the covenant created, the people who were told to follow God's rules and live together as a single unit. The Hebrew person walked toward the promise. It became a home for the Israelites. It would stay with them even after many generations. Being an Israelite meant more than just being a son of Jacob. It meant being a part of a chosen, different people with a moral code and a spiritual tradition that could never be broken. The name Israel, which God gave them on that strange night, will last forever, not just as a label, but as a steady reminder that answering God's call means going through hard times, changing, and most of all, being true. The mountain shook. Thunder and lightning shook the sky, letting everyone know about something they had never seen before. At the base of Sinai, something that couldn't be seen became real. Heaven reached down and touched earth. There, in front of thousands of shocked people, God spoke. At that point, Jacob's children and grandchildren stopped being just a big family and turned into something totally different, a holy country bound by a divine promise. At that moment of fear and glory, the people were given the law. Individual politicians did not make it, and meetings did not decide on it. The law came down from heaven, made by God himself. That's when the group of tribes that were joined by blood was called Israel, the people of the covenant. They were no longer just the children of a father, they were now a holy group put together by God. Theologian Gerhard von Rad said that this event was the first of its kind in the history of humanity. His point was that Israel did not pick a God to worship like other countries did. It was the other way around. God picked the people and shaped their lives based on a moral, spiritual, and permanent bond. There was something about Israel that set it apart from all the other peoples in the world. At that point, being an Israelite wasn't just about having a certain family tree. Having Jacob's blood wasn't enough. It was necessary to follow what God had made clear. Living under the bond was the most important thing about being an Israelite. The Torah, the set of divine orders given to Moses, became the guide for everything people did every day, from what they ate and wore to how they treated their friend. The Torah wasn't just a list of rules for everyday life. It was how God's holiness showed up in the real world for a visible people. Everything in Israel showed what kind of person the Eternal One was. Rav Eliezer Berkovitz writes in his book God, Man and History that an Israelite wasn't just someone who was related to Jacob, he was a live witness. His life was a constant reaction to the promise he made with the Most High. It wasn't military power that gave this new character its shape. It wasn't a house or a walled area. Being an Israelite wasn't built on swords, but on obeying God. Even though they didn't have a king, they had a sovereign. Even though they didn't have a city, the tabernacle, which stood for God's presence among them, was their spiritual heart. Also, the social and clan organization was one of a kind. It was split into 12 groups, or tribes, and each one was linked to one of Jacob's sons. This decentralized but unified group was based on the movable refuge that people took with them into the desert. Each group had its own land, a flag that stood for something important, and a specific job to do in the society. People there lived for worship, not power. The tribe of Levi did not get land like the other tribes did. Their legacy was to serve as priests. It was their job to lead prayer, teach, and protect spiritual information. Judah would be in charge of the government in the future and turn into a line of kings. And Ephraim and Manasseh, Joseph's sons, each got 2 inheritances. This showed that Jacob's gift on his obedient son would last forever. This split didn't stop the groups from working together. In fact, it made it easier for them to do so. Even though each one was different, they were all united by the same law, the same God, and the same goal, to show the countries how holy God is. In the Old World, Israel's government was the first of its kind. After making a straight deal with heaven, no other society had grown. And so, in the middle of the desert, a new country grew up without any walls, castles, thrones, or strong forces. The people who were against it didn't get it. Its neighbors were afraid of it because, unlike every other group of people, Israel was a society that God called together. It was built on spiritual principles. The law it had was perfect, and its job would never end. Israel's tribal organization did not happen by accident or because of a political system shared by peoples in the area. The biblical scholar, Yehuda Elitzur, correctly pointed out that each group was like a family tree and a spiritual part of the country as a whole. The division of land was based on a holy reasoning, with each area carrying the traditions of the patriarch who founded it. Elitzur said that this arrangement of tribes was like a prophetic map, a picture of divine order in the midst of the chaos of the other countries. Unlike many other historical groups whose existence is unclear or based on stories, the Israelites' presence is supported by the Bible, archaeological evidence, and records from other sources. The Merneptah stele, which was found in Egypt and dates back to around 1208 BC, is one of the most important finds in this area. The people of Israel are first mentioned in this item, which is not in the Bible. The text says, "Israel is destroyed, and its seed no longer exists." This, ironically, shows that they were in Canaan at that time, At the end of the 13th century BC, this record shows that the people of Israel were already seen as a separate group. Their appearance in Canaan was not a story, but a real event. This claim is supported by the work of archaeologists like Israel Finkelstein and William Dever, who found evidence of more than 250 new country villages in the mountainous parts of Canaan between the 13th and 12th centuries BC. It's interesting that these towns didn't have any signs of idols or cult pictures. This is very different from the Canaanite and Philistine cultures, which were known for having very different pantheons. Many historians see the lack of idolatrous artifacts as a clear sign of the presence of a monotheistic group that was different from their neighbors' religious practices. This is a strong sign that the first Israelites came into being. Egyptologist Kenneth A. Kitchen uses a strict method that is in line with the reliability of biblical texts to come to the conclusion that the story of how Israel became a tribe with organized religions matches the biblical account perfectly. They were different from other countries because they had a simple social system, no pagan shrines, and a strong spiritual identity. Not only were they from different cultures, but they also had very different ideas about the world. Over the years, these people, who started out as religiously united tribe groups, started to want to keep their government in one place. With the start of the kingdom, things were brought together, first with Saul, then with David, and finally with Solomon. Israel hit its most powerful in terms of territory, politics, and religion during this time. It was decided that Jerusalem would be the city, the temple was built, and the Israelites' identity became stronger than ever. But after Solomon died, there was no longer any union. There were two parts of the kingdom. Israel, which had 10 tribes, was in the north, and Judah, which had Judah, Benjamin, and the Levites, was in the south. This split wasn't just about politics. It also showed problems within the group, disagreements among leaders, and spiritual drifting. Until it was destroyed by the Assyrians in 722 BC, the northern kingdom went farther and farther away from the rules. A lot of tribes were captured and spread out. It was after that that the word Israelite started to be used less often. After the northern kingdom died out, the kingdom of Judah became the place where God's people lived out their faith, kept their culture, and kept their identity. Because of this, the word Jew, which comes from Judah, started to become more common, especially during and after the Babylonian War. The word Israelite did not go away, though. People of the covenant, even those who stayed in the south, kept using it to talk about them. In a symbolic way, the word became even more important. It wasn't just a way to identify a group or a place. It was also a memory of the original promise made at Sinai. The Israelites were still the ones who brought the Torah and were called to be God's light to the other people. In this way, the Israelites were not just genetically related to Jacob. Their lives were shaped by God's plan, held together by a living covenant, divided into groups and led by eternal rules. They didn't lose their identity when they were destroyed or sent away. It lived on in the promises, the law, and the hope of restoration that would last for generations. If the Hebrews were the ones who obeyed God and crossed lines, and the Israelites were the ones who set up a country, then the Jews would be the ones who fought to keep their history alive. God called his people, he taught them, and finally he kept them. Each term represented a different part of their connection. The Israelites did more than just walk. They built too. They lived as witnesses of a kingdom run by heaven and showed the people what heaven was really like. Even though there were internal splits, forced migrations, and adulteries along the way, the Israelite identity still had the covenant's label on it. There was a calling that could not be broken, even when there was destruction. To be the holy country, the people set apart to show the world who the eternal God is. But over time, a new name began to appear, one that is now known all over the world: Jews. Many people think that the word Jew was used from the start, but it wasn't. It happened at a certain time in history. After Solomon died, the kingdom that had been one country split into two. the northern kingdom, which kept the name Israel and was made up of 10 tribes, and the southern kingdom, which was made up of the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and most of the Levites. It was called Judah. Jerusalem was the city of the south. It was also the site of the temple and the place where people worshipped the one God. The northern kingdom was wiped out by the Assyrian Empire in 722 BC. Its bands were sent away and lived with other groups. They never came back together as a country. The idea of the 10 lost tribes came from this terrible event. The northern kingdom was no longer around, leaving only the kingdom of Judah to stand as a sign of the bond with God. From then on, the people who lived in the south were called Jews, a name that came from the name of the main group, Judah. In Hebrew, the name Judah is written as Yehudah, which means praise or thanksgiving. Jacob and Leah had 4 children together. Judah was their 4th son. They named him this to show their thanks to God. Over time, the word Jew, in Hebrew, Yehudi, stopped just referring to the biological descendants of the tribe of Judah. It also came to include all people from the southern kingdom, such as the Benjaminites and Levites, and later all people who stuck to the faith of the patriarchs. If you read Simon Dubnau's book, History of the Jews, he says that the word Jew didn't become common until the northern tribes went away. This is because Judah was the only group that could be seen and used, so the name came to stand for all the people who were still part of the bond. This meant that the word stopped being a tribe sign and turned into a spiritual and cultural identity. This change in language showed a bigger truth. God's people were moving into a new phase, marked by resistance, keeping their faith, and fighting against becoming more like everyone else. It became part of being Jewish to stay true, even if you didn't have land, were in exile, or had a temple. Being a guardian of the Torah custom and the hope for the Messiah meant a lot. The word Jew came to mean the children of the covenant people most often over time, especially after the Babylonian exile and the return of the people under the direction of people like Ezra and Nehemiah. No longer did the original group matter. What did matter was being true to the God of Israel, his law, and the promise of restoration. When all the other groups died out, the Jew was the only one who kept the promise. He was the spiritual heir of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. As a result, Jewish identity did not come from power, but from keeping the faith alive, not because they were strong in battle, but because they were strong in spirit. The Jew became a sign of the promise that would never end, even when people were scattered, persecuted, and tried to erase Jewish culture. Many groups of people have faded over time, but the Jews have stayed. It wasn't based on lines that made them who they were. It was based on an eternal bond. So we can see a clear line of divine purpose from the Hebrews, who crossed countries, to the Israelites, who built the country, to the Jews who kept the faith. Every name holds a precious moment in history. Each shows a different part of the agreement. All of these things show that God is reliable and doesn't leave his people, even when everyone else tries to forget about him. When the northern kingdom fell apart, there was only one tribe left, standing out among the nations: Judah. Judah fought back, kept true worship alive, continued the line of kings, and kept the promise alive in people's minds. After that, everyone who made it through the crisis was known by one name: Jews. It was Judah who won, and its name would become the label for the people of the promise in a world full of chaos. In his book, Reformed Dogmatics, Reformed scholar Herman Bavinck calls this a very important turning point. After Israel was wiped out, Judah took care of the law, the temple, and the lineage of the Messiah. No longer just a matter of genetics or land rights, the word Jew came to mean anyone who stayed true to the God of Israel, even when they were in exile or things were going badly. In 2 Kings 16:6, during an armed battle, the word Jew is used for the first time in the Bible. The word was still used to talk about geography, linking the people to the southern kingdom. That being said, this name grew over time. From the time of the Babylonian exile until the end of the book of Esther, The word Jew was not used to describe different groups. It came to include everyone in the community who still believed, prayed, and had hope. A big change can be seen in this broader use. Being Jewish wasn't tied to where you lived or your political views anymore. It wasn't dependent on a separate country, a chair that could be seen, or a stone temple. Being Jewish was now a religious and spiritual identity, a way of living out the promise that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob made with God that would last forever. The name stood tall against nothingness and in the eyes of nations. When the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem in 586 BC, they destroyed the temple, set the city on fire, and sent the people who lived there away. It was a terrible blow. It was strange that it wasn't the end. It was the start of a new phase. The people learned that their faith could live on outside the walls, even though they didn't have an altar, a king, or land. It was the start of Judaism as we know it today, with its focus no longer on a place, but on a written vow and a life of prayer, study, and hope. Aside from the temple, synagogues grew over time. The Torah books became the most important thing in sacred life. Teachers, scribes, and thinkers took the place of the religious elite. Offerings were no longer needed for worship. Instead, the word and respect from everyone were what mattered. In this setting, being Jewish became more clearly defined as following one's faith, even when they are in a different country. Orthodox Rabbi Jonathan Sacks clears this up in his book The Letter and the Spirit. Exile did not destroy Judaism. That changed it. Living by the law, even when David's throne couldn't be seen, became an important part of being Jewish for him. Being in exile taught me that loyalty isn't based on outward safety, but on strong convictions inside me. 70 years after they were sent away, a miracle happened out of the blue. Cyrus, king of Persia, allowed a small group of loyal people to return to Jerusalem. With the help of Zerubbabel, Ezra, and Nehemiah, they rebuilt the temple, raised the walls, and brought religion back to Judah. But something very important had changed. Tribes were no longer being talked about. Now there was only one group of people, and they were called Jews. The word Jew came to mean all children of the covenant, no matter what tribe they were from. For those who refused to give in to integration, it was a way to show who they were. It was the name of people who kept the Torah close to their hearts, even when they were ruled by other princes. A term that wasn't just a name. It became a sign of how the biblical faith lives on. The story began with a guy named Abram, who people from the outside called a Hebrew. It was now time for a new beginning. The Hebrews went across. The Israelites sat down. But it was the Jews who kept going, even when it looked like everything around them was falling apart. The name stayed. The promise did too. After wars, captivity, and exile, there was neither a strong country nor a successful kingdom left. Instead, there was a loyal remnant. They were the remains of the kingdom of Judah. They were spread out, but they were not abandoned. Because of this strong center, the name Jew became the official name of the covenant people, both for those who stayed in Jerusalem and for those who left for places like Egypt, Syria, Babylon, Asia Minor, and more. The word Jew came to mean more than just a group of people. At this point, a path marked by defiance, faith, and loyalty had come together. They started calling themselves Jews, even if they were from dead groups like Levi or Benjamin. Their connection wasn't based on where they came from anymore. It was a spiritual one. This identity was based on Mosaic Judaism, following the Torah and the hope for the coming of the Messiah. In the 1st century AD, the word Jew, from the Latin Judei, was used to refer to a wide range of people. They thought that all people who followed Moses' teachings were Jews, even if they weren't sure what tribe they were from. Their traditions, the Sabbath, circumcision, holy days, ritual food, and most of all, their unshakable devotion to an unseen God, set them apart from other people. The word Jew is used more than 60 times in the Gospels and other New Testament works. For example, Jesus is called King of the Jews many times. This shows that being Jewish at that time meant being the official heir to Abraham's faith and the promise of the Messiah. At that point in history, there was no longer any difference between Israelites and Jews. The word became the only way to refer to the covenant people. In his book, Antiquities of the Jews, the Jewish Roman writer Flavius Josephus backs up this point of view. No matter where they are in the kingdom, he says that Jews are people who follow the law of Moses. He thought that the promise had been kept, even though the land had been lost. No longer was Jewish identity based on where they lived. It came from following the Torah and keeping the traditions alive. As the number of Jews living outside of Israel grew over the ages, the word Jew took on new meanings. There were important questions like, who is Jewish? According to traditional rabbinic law, the answer is clear. Anyone born to a Jewish mother or who has become Jewish through an official process and agreed to follow the Torah's rules and rabbinic practices. This meaning was widely accepted in Orthodox Judaism, and the modern state of Israel later used it in its rules on citizenship. But being Jewish today is more than just having Jewish ancestors or becoming Jewish. It has spiritual, cultural, and racial parts to it. It's both a family tradition and a choice, a tale of living and a new promise. The word Jew still has a lot of meanings today. It doesn't just stand for an old tribe. It stands for the group that didn't give up, the one who came back, rebuilt, and kept the faith even when things looked bad. Because Judah was the only tribe that had not been lost, its name came to mean the whole group of people who kept the promise. For the Hebrews, it meant giving up everything to follow, and for the Israelites, it meant becoming a holy people. But for the Jews, it meant spiritual life. Even though they didn't have a chapel, a king, or a place, they kept hope alive. Ashes of exile, ashes of oppression, and the edges of the world are where faith was remade, generation after generation. Because of this, Jew is more than just a name. People are still alive to show that God kept his promise to Abraham, that the goal stayed the same even when the people were spread out. Remember the promises even if you don't say anything. It means to hold out even when everyone else has given up. It is to start over even when it looks like everything is lost. And that character, which was formed in the fire of hardship, is still alive today, not as a way to remember the past, but as the light of a faith that has never gone out. From Babylon to now, the Jewish name has been used. It has been used during the powers of Persia, Greece, and Rome, as well as during the Inquisition, the Holocaust, and modern dispersion. It has stood the test of time as a live reminder of the promise Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob made with God. This character has been tried to be erased in every age, but it has stayed. As for Christians, this name is even more important because Jesus of Nazareth, the promised Messiah, was born a Jew and was the direct heir of the tribe of Judah. He was also a cousin of David and the fulfillment of the greatest promises. Hebrew, Israelite, and Jew are three words that have been used over the years to describe this unique group of people. At first glance, they might look like they are just similar words or changes in the language. But when we look more closely, we see that each one stands for a different part of God's ultimate plan. They don't go against or cancel each other out. Instead, they weave together like the threads of a holy cord, connecting faith, history, and purpose. It's more than just a matter of history to understand these identities. There is a spiritual insight here, because when we look at the journey of God's people, we can see our own journey of faith as God's children. So let's go over these names again and get a better sense of what they mean. Genesis 14:13 says that Abram was the first person to be called a Hebrew. This name didn't come from God or Abram, it came from somewhere else. That's how everyone else saw this different man, who had left his home country and crossed the Euphrates River to follow the call of an unseen God. The word Hebrew comes from the Hebrew word avar, which means to go through or cross over. Being Hebrew was not a national or racial identity because of this. It was a spiritual title that meant someone who turned away from their pagan roots and put their faith in a promise that had not yet been kept. It was the sign of someone who gave up everything to follow God's will. For this reason, anyone who leaves the old world to follow God's rules is also a Hebrew, meaning they have crossed over. After that, Jacob was given the name Israel after he beat an angel in a fight. His 12 boys formed a new group, which became known as the Israelites. It was no longer just one pilgrim. It was now a different, saved society set up by God. The Israelite wasn't just a son of Jacob. He was part of a holy country that was called to speak for God among other countries. As an Israelite, you were part of the group that lived on Sinai and got the Torah. You also helped build the tabernacle and followed the Eternal One's directions in the desert. It means following a set of rules, having a tribe, celebrating holidays, and having a reason for life. The Israelite was not only a blood child, but also a worker of the covenant, someone who was sworn to obey, do what was right, and be a light to all people. Over time, the northern kingdom fell apart, leaving only the kingdom of Judah standing. This small group is where the third identity, Jew, came from. Those who came back from exile stayed true, even though they didn't have a chapel or a king. They built their faith again in the ruins. Prayer took the place of offering. It was the synagogue that stood in for the altar. The Torah became the most important thing in everyone's life. After that, the name Jew came to mean those who lived and kept the word, even though they were spread out in different countries. Being Jewish became a sign of spiritual resistance in real life. It wasn't about family anymore. It was about loyalty. History, the law, and hope had to be carried on one's back and passed on to each new generation. So the Hebrews did what they were told and crossed. The Israelites did what they were told and became a holy people. And the Jews kept their faith alive and followed, even when they were in a different country. 3 names, 3 stages, and 1 person. A people who were not born of free will, but by God's choice. A group of people that still exists today and reminds the world that God is faithful even when things look like they are going wrong. In the desert, he heard the voice. At the base of Mount Sinai, he shook. He walked among clouds of glory and fire shafts. They crossed the Jordan River and lived in the Promised Land. They saw judges go by, sat under kings' wings, and heard the prophets' fiery words. This is the Israel of the covenant. These were the people who carried the law on their backs and stuck to God's rules, even when everything else around them tried to destroy them. But this trip wasn't a straight one. There were mistakes, disagreements, and uprisings. The groups split up. 10 were lost. There was only a small group left. The torch was held lit by Judah, Benjamin, and the Levites. They were left behind, and it was up to them to keep the Torah alive, keep the prophets' voices alive, and keep the hope of the Messiah alive. Jews is a word that has been used for thousands of years and comes from this faithful group that was born broken and shaped in exile. They were the ones who kept the Sabbath even when they were away from home. They taught their children to pray with their faces toward Jerusalem, even when there wasn't a palace or an altar. They put together ruins, held feasts in silence, and quietly waited for vows to come true. The word Jew came to mean persistence, hope, and healing, and it was from this small group that the Messiah was born. The names Hebrew, Israelite, and Jew do not separate people. They don't try to beat each other. They're all parts of the same story that fit together. They are steps on the path to seeing the truth. The Hebrew is the person who is called by themselves, the one who gives up everything and crosses over based only on faith. As a group, the Israelites are the people who organize themselves under the bond and receive the law and the purpose. The loyal few are Jews. They are the ones who suffer, protect, and wait. All of these roads lead to Jesus Christ. He is the ideal Hebrew person because he left glory, came to live among us, and crossed from being unseen to being seen. He is the real Israel. He is the Son who obeyed, who kept the law, who showed us the heart of the Father, and who came as a servant and a king. He is the true Jew, the son of Judah and the heir to David's throne. He died as a lamb on the cross and rose from the dead as a king. We can learn from all of this that our religion does not start with the New Testament. It's the next step in a plan that has been around since the time of Abraham, was made in Israel, and is being kept alive in Judah. God sent his Son into the world so that redemption could also come to the Gentiles. This is the same God who called Abraham, led the Israelites through the desert, and fed them while they were in exile. The Christian faith is not a fresh start, it is the keeping of an old promise. Paul said in Romans 2:28-29 that a true Jew is one who is Jewish in their heart and mind. In Galatians 3:29 he says, "If you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's descendants and heirs according to the promise." The church doesn't take the place of Israel. Instead, it grows alongside it like a branch on the same olive tree. We both come from the same source of kindness. As part of a plan, we have the power to choose, shape, and protect. And the character of the saved people stays the same even after kingdoms and human systems fall. Through the years, many men and women have heard the same voice that Abraham did. They have brought the same promise that Israel got. They have kept the same hope alive that Judah did. They are the ones who believe, follow, and wait. Greeks, those who walk by faith. Israelites are the people who fight with God and follow the rules of the agreement. Jews, people who have hope even when they are hurting. 3 words that explain the wonder of a people who have always been there. 3 names that show how trustworthy a God is. One who calls, one who makes, and one who keeps. This is also our story, thanks to the Messiah, because these names come up again every time someone dies for their faith in Christ. Every time someone joins the people of the covenant through the blood of the King, and every time someone suffers and stays true. It means one who trusts everything. A Jew is someone who is shaped by the Bible. A Jew is someone who waits for the end. And together, we keep going, because God's people still have a story to tell. This story may have touched your heart. Please share this movie with someone who also needs to remember that God is true over many years. Tell your friends about this message and like it. God's people are still living, and the promise still stands. Thank you for following us to the end of this incredible story. See you in the next video. May God be with you always. Amen.